Good morning and welcome to the Suicide Prevention Show here on 1360 WLBK, a show that tries to shed a little light on the darkness of suicide. I'm your host, T.D. Ryan, and joining us once again is prominent author John F. Zurn. John has wrote several books concerning his mental illness and battles with the mental illness. And John, I wonder if you could just give our listeners a little background about what you're all about and how you managed to write these books.
Thanks so much for having me. I've been married for 29 years. I have a bachelor's degree and master's degree in English from Western Illinois University. I've taught elementary, middle school, and high school. I've taught refugees and students with autism. I've also been a psychosocial rehabilitation counselor. I've also lived with bipolar disorder for my whole life. When I was 20, I did try to commit suicide, and that's how they found I didn't have schizophrenia. I was bipolar. So the writing came as a kind of way to deal with the mental illness, and it gradually developed into creative talent that I've really enjoyed over the years.
Now, John, you've written about 4 books altogether. Tell us about those first 2 books that you wrote.
The first book was called Bipolar Challenge, and it's basically kind of a handbook that talks about bipolar disorder and things about it, a little autobiography too. Then Memoirs of a Bipolar Soul is a complete autobiography about what my life was like, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I didn't sugarcoat it. So, and also there's poems in each of those 2 books as well.
And talking about the 2 books that you've written, one, Promise of a Long-Term Recovery, and the second one is a novel, a fiction novel, isn't it, John?
Very much so. It's a sci-fi fantasy novel. I really wanted to put my creativity to work on a project like that, and it was a lot of fun.
Yes, your fictional novel is called Expedition to the Northland. It really sounds like a fascinating read. But when it comes to your own mental illness, your bipolar disorder, how did you find out that you had that, John?
Well, when I was about 19, I had appendicitis, and I almost died from it, and I became very aware of death, and this obsession with death led to trying to figure out what it meant. So eventually I had a couple of 3 psychotic breaks in a row where I deliberately raced my thoughts as fast as possible, trying to figure out, in my own way, trying to figure out the meaning of death. So after that, I started to get sick over and over and over again until I really got serious about medications. They found out what was wrong with me, of course, and the right medications and all the coping skills and so forth. But it was a long process, but I really wanted my life back. You know, mental illness steals everything. Dignity, everything. So when I got to the part where I was really kind of stable, I said to myself, you know, I want a life too. It might not be what I planned for or hoped for, but I want a life. So I made a lot of conscious decisions about lifestyle changes and coping styles and so forth that were really helpful.
So when you say you were obsessed with death, what does that mean exactly? What does that look like, John, when you say you're obsessed with death?
Okay, when I had appendicitis and I was operated on it, my appendix had almost burst. And back in 1974, if it had, I would have died for sure. So all of a sudden, I'm realizing, you know what? I'm 19 years old, but I could die. And it just hit me like a thunderbolt. And I just, ever since then, really wanted to get to the bottom of it.
So I guess you became aware of your own mortality there.
Yes. And then the mental illness, of course, just adds in there, and then you got all of it together. Mental illness is a biological brain disorder. It is not a weakness or lack of character, so no matter how much counseling, how much creativity, how much jogging, the illness remains. And without the medication, the illness remains. And that's the lesson I had to learn. And it took humility, a lot of humility to do that.
So you're never completely cured then, or healed. I guess you're healed at it, but you're still vulnerable. I guess you're always vulnerable to that, aren't you?
There's no cure for mental illness. None of the major mental illnesses have a cure as of yet. There's a lot of better medication. The social stigma is still as bad as it ever was, in my opinion, and there's a lot to support that. But personal stigma, especially with NAMI, NAMI's worked really hard with families and individuals so we can feel better about ourselves. We can, enjoy life, get involved again. NAMI's made all the difference. In fact, until I actually was with NAMI about 5 years ago, I still thought that for some reason that illness was my fault. And after being with them, it was all over. And what a huge burden to be lifted.
Oh, I bet.
And also I got to be myself. I've had to hide that my whole adult life. When someone finds out you have a mental illness, you see the fear in their eyes and their immediate rejection. So I had to, anytime to get a job, keep a job, I never told anything about mental illness. I kind of just closed the spigot off. Then I get to NAMI, and all of a sudden I can just open up the spigot. I'm doing presentations. I'm talking with people. I'm learning from them. Just a wonderful experience.
Yeah, we were just talking to a lady last week about her mental illness and about trying to apply for a job. And if you put that down on a job resume, you're probably not going to get that job, are you? It's a catch-22. You want people to know, but yet if you write that down, you might not get the job.
No, there is. I'll give you a really good example that I just thought of today. When I was in Elgin Mental Health Center, I was there 3 different times for months at a time. But when I was there, a Christian couple agreed to take me in if I had a job. So I left the institution during the day and got a job. And by getting the job, I could stay with them. Can you imagine putting on my application that I was now at Elgin Mental Health Center and ever getting a job in a million years? The stigma is really, really. I was reading a thing on genetics the other day, and the genetic counselor was saying that mental illness is still the most it's the most profoundly stigmatized illness of all. So there's a long way to go. That's why shows like this and NAMI are so important.
We're talking with local author John Zurn and talking about his latest book, battling with his own mental illness. And John, you kind of break it down in the book. You have a section here called Anatomy of a Psychological Breakdown. And I wonder if we could just go through this step by step and explain each step of the process, if you would.
Okay, when someone gets ill, the medical model is you treat them with medications, therapy, and counseling, and build their self-confidence. You help them support the separate self, the person becoming an individual or staying individual, and after that, they're healed. The problem is, if you don't go beyond that, if someone is looking for something spiritual, and it's not there, very likely they can be kicked back up into the relapse stage. And that's what happened to me over and over and over again. Partly because I didn't take the medication. I had to learn that lesson. But also I had to find a system where it was open-ended for me. So instead of being the separate little person, I could have some kind of relationship with God.
John, I come from a family of alcoholics. My father, my brother, and my sister all have battled that, and they've gone through the program and actually have had to go through it 2 or 3 times. So they kind of knew that they were going to fail going in, and that kind of helped them a little bit, knowing that they might not be able to master it the first time. Did you find that with your mental illness, John? Were you able to say, all right, I'm going to try to get through this, but if it doesn't take, I'll just have to do it again?
I never expect a relapse. What I look at myself as, I look at myself as healed unless I have to deal with it again. But I do all the things I need to not to get sick. But occasionally, for example, once I was in the hospital and I had salmonella. Then they purged everything out of my system, so I was physically well, but all the medicine was gone, so then I was mentally ill. So things like that, unpredictable things do come up. But it can be very difficult to sustain a long-term recovery. 3 of the most important things are having a sense of purpose, overcoming boredom and loneliness. Those 3, you can be on all the medications and they can be perfect. Those 3 could still take you down. So this idea of the separate self, creativity, and spirit in terms of spirituality, there has to be a way to have an open system. And I finally got involved in meditation, which allowed me to have that open system. In other words, creativity became a way to express myself, spirituality. Meditation became a way to listen to God. Prayer is talking to God, meditation is listening to God. So gradually I had this idea that I could, kind of free myself of the mind at times. And that was kind of an open communication link. And then the relapses were much fewer and far between. But medication was huge. I don't like to admit how important medication is, but it really is.
So I guess you could say idle time is one of your biggest enemies.
Absolutely, absolutely. For me, I have to schedule my entire day from beginning to end. And if I have a hole in that day, I got to fill it because my mind will turn against me very quickly.
So, John, when we talk about the healing process, we're talking about medicine and psychological help as well, and it's all kind of combined together, isn't it?
Yeah.
As you begin to heal.
Yeah, and it's very hard. Mental illness is very alienating in itself, and it's a very lonely experience in itself. So you need support groups and people that care, like NAMI, that really care about who you are and what you're doing, genuinely. Those people actually really, really care about me, not because they have to, because they care about me. And that's an experience that's very rare with someone with mental illness.
And when we use the term NAMI, we should explain that stands for National Alliance Against Mental Illness. What is that exactly, John?
National Alliance on Mental Illness.
And I believe there's a local chapter here, NAMI. I believe it's in DuPage, as a matter of fact. But, John, take us through the process now with when you are healing and beginning the healing process. What if you do, or what if you don't, or ever have a relapse?
Okay. The thing is, the medicine is really important. Coping skills for me, like jogging, writing, getting enough sleep. Someone who doesn't have enough sleep, it feels like you're actually having a relapse. You have the symptoms of a mental illness with not enough sleep. Hunger is the same thing. When I work with the police, the first thing you try to find out is the person had any sleep. When you go into a mental health facility, the first thing they do is they try to put you to sleep if you're mad. I mean, that's the very first thing. So sleep is huge, and a lot of times younger people don't fully understand that. So they stay up till 2 o'clock, and it gets to be a problem for them. If they go to bed earlier, get a specific amount of sleep each night, it would help them. For me, meditation and jogging and so forth, the stuff I've done for a long period of years. In meditation, a lot of people wonder creativity in meditation. Medicine, does it affect spirituality? Expect creativity? No. I mean, God is infinite. He can do anything.
Now, when it comes to medicine, most of us want to take medicine until we don't need it anymore, kind of make it obsolete for us. But when it comes to mental illness, it's a little different take on that when we talk about medicine, isn't it?
It's a dangerous thing to do. For me, I'd have people advise me about taking medication, still not taking medication and so forth. But they were never around when I got peeled off the sidewalk somewhere. You get into a manic state, and it can be. This is another thing about suicide. Someone in a manic state, or someone with having a schizophrenia episode, it can be so bad you'd kill yourself because you can't stand it. So depression's the big thing that causes suicide, but so does other stuff. And pretty much you have to just, with the medication, say the heck with it. I don't care what anybody else thinks. This works for me. I need it.
And again, even though your mind at the time you feel fine, you have to really force yourself to take the medicine? Because how do you tell yourself, well, I'm feeling fine now, I don't need the medicine?
Well, everybody does that at least once. Most people think that it's like the flu, that you get it once, then you don't need it anymore. But if you have a serious mental illness, you do. But the thing about taking the medication is it takes humility. What a great part of a spiritual path, humility, patience, It's great. I mean, the most important thing you're supposed to have is humility, and it does take humility to take the medication.
Very good. Talking with John Zurn, again, local author and also battling his own mental illness. And anxiety, I know, is a big problem, John, and you have here some possible suggestions for managing anxiety. Tell us about that, why anxiety is such a problem, and how and can we manage it?
Stress makes everything worse. If you have a mental illness, stress is your number one enemy other than the illness itself. Because when you're under stress, the symptoms start to show. And then you have to engage all your coping skills. But the more stress, the more anxiety, the more likely you could get sick. Or it just makes your life terrible, too. I mean, with obsessive-compulsive disorder, for example, you're anxious all the time. Mm-hmm. And people with OCD have like 60 to 90% depression rates. So the anxiety can be a real problem. So I have had to identify ways to specifically deal with the anxiety. And one is through meditation. Another is through writing. Another is through jogging. Jogging is huge. I can be really nervous. I can be agitated and irritable and anxious. After I jog, it all goes away. My problems don't go away, but the nervous energy associated with it does.
Now, I do a lot of jogging, and I think a lot when I'm jogging. Are you thinking a lot, or what is your mind doing while you're jogging?
Believe it or not, I usually count steps or don't think at all.
Okay.
But actually, thinking is good, too, because you get you get your thoughts out as you're jogging, so it's really good for you too. I mean, I don't know if they say release endorphins or what, but it's been really good for me. And I used to run in high school, and I wasn't very good, so now I can jog, and there's nobody following me. I can just kind of jog along. So.
All right, we're coming up on a break, and after the break, we're going to talk with John Zurn some more about managing anxiety and the steps along the way and how you can help you to manage anxiety.
Two ways. It's a British publisher. It's Chipmunka Publishing. That's Chipmunka with an A, Chipmunka.
Okay.
But also, I can get them at lots, so I buy them wholesale, so I can sell them. But John Zurn, Box 620, Geneva, Illinois, 60134, and I get them at cost. So and I charge at cost. So it's $11 plus $2 postage. So it's a really good deal. But on the Chipmunka website, you can find all my books, and they tell about them. It's a really good website.
All right, so it's just like the word chipmunk with an A. So Chipmunk with an A Publishing. We're going to take a break. We'll come back, talk some more with John Zurn here on the Suicide Prevention Show here on 1360 WLBK.